U.S. aviation crash investigators are in Monterey County, California tonight.
John Denver's tragic plane crash stunned the world, and for years, questions lingered with no clear answers. But now the truth has finally surfaced, and it's deeply unsettling. What really happened in the sky that fateful day? What chain of events led to the heartbreaking loss of a music legend? At last, the full story is coming to light.
That he had consumed alcohol before he flew his plane.
Revealing a side of Denver few ever saw. Join us as we uncover every haunting detail.
Trying to determine the cause of an accident that killed John Denver.
The sky called and Denver answered. John Denver wasn't just a musician. He was a feeling. When his songs played, it felt like being wrapped in a warm embrace. From Sunshine on My Shoulders to Take Me Home Country Roads, his music comforted millions. But while his lyrics celebrated peace and nature, John's real life carried more complexity than most ever realized. He had two great passions, music and flying. One brought him fame, the other, freedom and risk. Denver wasn't a hobby pilot. He trained rigorously and earned the credentials to fly everything from single-engine planes to gliders and even jets. While other stars collected cars or parties, John collected hours in the sky. For him, flying wasn't about flash. It was about liberation. He once said the joy he felt while flying was the same as writing a song. The sky, to John Denver, was home. While others escaped on red carpets, John found peace in the cockpit. His love for aviation even stretched into the stars. He dreamed of singing in space and came closer than most ever would. John passed NASA's physical and psychological exams and was in the running to become the first civilian in space. His vision? To compose a song in zero gravity. But that dream didn't come true. He was cut from the program, heartbreaking at the time, but in hindsight, it saved his life. The shuttle was Challenger. It exploded moments after liftoff in 1986. John watched it happen from the ground. That moment haunted him for the rest of his life. Still, he kept flying. Not occasionally, constantly, and not always cautiously either. He enjoyed a little risk. Sometimes just to challenge himself, he'd kill the engine mid-air and glide the plane safely down. Friends were concerned. John just smiled. "I'm in control," he'd say, always. As his music career began to fade from the spotlight, John found a higher purpose. He became one of the first celebrities to champion environmental causes. He didn't just sing about the earth, he fought to protect it. His song, Whose Garden Was This?, was an early wake-up call, warning of environmental destruction long before most people were even talking about climate change. Even with his deep love for the planet, his eyes were always on the sky. In late 1997, he became captivated by a sleek, unusual plane, the Long EZ. It was experimental, home-built, and different from most aircraft. But there was a dangerous flaw. The fuel selector valve was awkwardly placed behind the pilot's left shoulder. Unlike most planes where it's easily reachable, this one required the pilot to unbuckle the harness and twist around mid-flight to operate it. It was a bad design, but John didn't mind. He fell in love with the aircraft at first sight. The seller assured him it was in top condition. On September 27, 1997, he bought the Long EZ for $56,000. He had big plans: repaint it, register a custom tail number, N555 JD, and spend more time in the air than ever before. But first, he just wanted to fly it. Just a few days later, on October 5th, he gave his final concert in Corpus Christi, Texas. He looked vibrant. His voice was strong. No one could have predicted it would be his last time on stage. Then came October 11th. John took the Long EZ out with a flight instructor to test it thoroughly. They checked everything: landing procedures, flight controls, and especially that awkward fuel valve. John admitted it was hard to reach and said he planned to relocate it. The instructor approved. All seemed well. The next day, Sunday, October 12th, John was scheduled to play golf with friends. They asked him to stay for another round, but he was too eager. The plane had just been repainted. He couldn't wait to take it out. Wearing green pants, a colorful sweater, and cowboy boots, he arrived at Monterey Peninsula Airport. The weather was perfect, calm winds, clear skies. He performed his routine pre-flight checks, but one thing stood out: low fuel. The right tank was less than half full. The left, about a quarter. Still, John believed it was enough for a short flight. At 5:12 p.m., he received clearance for takeoff. He told the control tower he planned to do 3 quick, touch-and-go landings, standard practice for experienced pilots. At 5:27 p.m., he asked to fly outside the airport's normal pattern for a brief cruise. The tower acknowledged and asked for his transponder code. John's final words were, "Do you have it now?" Moments later, the radar lost him. What happened next was horrifying. Witnesses on the ground saw the plane flying smoothly at about 500 feet. Then suddenly it banked hard to the right and nosedived straight into the ocean off Pacific Grove. Some reported hearing a pop or engine backfire seconds before the dive. The plane was too low. There was no time to level out, no time to call for help, no time to react. By the time emergency crews arrived, only 3 minutes had passed, but the outcome was already decided. The long EZ had struck the water nose first and shattered on impact. The wreckage was recovered in shallow water, just 30 feet deep. It matched witness accounts: a sharp dive, no signs of recovery, and no distress signal. Divers and boats quickly began their work. But this wasn't a rescue. It was a recovery mission. Over the next few hours, they carefully pulled pieces of the aircraft from the ocean floor. Then came the devastating task: retrieving John Denver's remains. The coroner's report confirmed what the world feared. John Denver had died instantly. Blunt force trauma, no defensive wounds. It was quick, too fast for anyone, even a seasoned pilot, to respond. The news sent shockwaves across the globe. Fans, friends, and fellow artists were stunned. To so many, John Denver wasn't just a singer. He was a voice of hope and harmony in a noisy, divided world. He sang about nature, love, and life's simple beauty. Now he was gone, suddenly and tragically. But while the world mourned, the investigation began. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, launched a full-scale investigation. They weren't just asking how the crash happened. They wanted to know why. And as the facts came together, one uncomfortable truth became clear. The crash was preventable. A search that changed everything. Investigators began where any crash investigation does: the aircraft itself. The Long EZ wasn't a commercial model. It was custom-built in the late 1980s and had passed through several owners. On paper, it appeared airworthy. But one critical design flaw immediately raised alarms: the fuel selector valve. To switch fuel tanks mid-flight, a pilot had to let go of the control stick, unbuckle the safety harness, twist around, and fumble blindly to find the valve behind the left shoulder. It wasn't just awkward, it was dangerous. John had been warned about it. During his earlier test flight with a certified instructor, they discussed the valve at length. Denver had even begun planning to move it to a more accessible spot. But the modification wasn't done yet. Then came another major concern: fuel levels. On the day of the crash, John had less than half a tank in the right wing and less than a quarter in the left. This meant he would have to switch tanks during the flight. John reportedly planned to engage autopilot to do so safely. But when investigators examined the wreckage, they found no autopilot installed. So any switch would have required John to manage the controls manually while reaching for a hard-to-access valve midair. Which raised an even bigger question: why didn't he just fill the tanks before takeoff? The answer was tragically simple: he didn't think he needed to. John expected to be in the air for under an hour and told the mechanic that topping off the tanks wasn't necessary. But no one knew exactly how quickly the tanks would drain, or if they were feeding fuel evenly. Other pilots who had flown Long EZs shared disturbing stories. 2 had run out of fuel mid-flight for the same reason: the awkwardly placed valve. One pilot nearly crashed. The other narrowly averted disaster by switching tanks just in time. They survived. John didn't. NTSB investigators even tested the maneuver themselves, climbing into a similar long EZ and trying to reach the valve while flying. Every attempt was difficult, not just because of the angle, but because twisting in the cockpit could cause accidental pressure on the rudder pedals, potentially sending the plane into an unexpected turn or spin. It was a serious risk, even for experienced pilots. But the plane's flaws weren't the only thing under review. The NTSB also examined John's flying history, and what they found raised serious questions. Back in 1993, Denver was arrested for driving under the influence. He received a fine and probation. Then, in 1994, he crashed his Porsche into trees, again while under the influence. That same year, he had a minor accident involving his Kristen Eagle plane, clipping another aircraft at a runway intersection. In 1995, he told his doctor that he drank moderately, just 2 to 4 drinks a week when traveling, and denied any drug use. Still, the FAA wasn't satisfied. Due to his legal history and incomplete medical documentation, they revoked his medical certificate in March 1997. Officially, that meant John Denver was not legally cleared to fly. Yet, he continued flying. The looming questions shifted. Not just how the crash happened, but why he was in the air at all. When the toxicology report came back, it showed no alcohol or drugs in his system. So, he wasn't impaired during the flight. But it didn't erase the fact he was flying without clearance. What investigators concluded next brought everything into focus. John had attempted to switch fuel tanks during flight. With no autopilot, he had to do it manually. He likely loosened his seatbelt, turned his body, and reached back. During the twist, he may have accidentally pressed the right rudder pedal, causing the plane to bank sharply. Combined with the distraction of reaching for the valve, that unintended pressure could have tipped the plane and sent it into a fatal nosedive. There was no catastrophic failure, no foul weather, no impairment, just a split-second mistake, one made by a man with thousands of flight hours, a deep love of the sky, and one small design flaw he didn't have time to fix. John Denver's crash didn't just shock the world, it raised questions that didn't go away. For fans, it was devastating. For those closest to him, it left a painful, lingering what if. For investigators, it was complicated. Was it preventable? As the evidence came together, the answer became clearer. It wasn't one poor decision. It was a series of small, overlooked choices, each seemingly harmless until they formed a deadly chain. He had flown without a filed flight plan. He didn't refuel. He knew the valve was poorly placed, and he took off despite being grounded by the FAA. Perhaps the hardest truth to accept was why he still flew. John wasn't just a hobbyist. He was born to a military pilot, raised in cockpits shaped by flight. Flying wasn't just a pastime. It was part of his identity. It was his freedom, his therapy, his escape. People close to him said he was frustrated after losing his license. Yes, he had sobered up. Yes, he had stayed out of trouble. But the FAA wouldn't budge, and that rejection stayed with him. For John, this wasn't about defiance, it was about trying to feel whole again. After the crash, the spotlight turned to the Long EZ. Loved by experimental aircraft enthusiasts, the plane was fast and efficient, but its unique design came with serious risks. And under pressure, low fuel, no autopilot, even the most experienced pilot could falter. John Denver was no exception. Had the plane been fully fueled, he wouldn't have needed to touch that valve. But John didn't refuel. He told the mechanic not to worry. He thought it was just a quick flight. That single assumption sealed his fate. Even more heartbreaking, he had already started the process to relocate the valve. The mechanic was working on it, but John was too eager to wait. He wanted to fly. What broke people the most wasn't just the crash, it was how avoidable it was. Back in California, recovery teams moved quickly. Within hours, most of the plane and John's body were recovered. The Pacific Ocean gave up its secrets fast, but what they revealed was hard to process. There was no mystery, Just a silent, irreversible mistake. Fans responded immediately. Candlelight vigils appeared across the country. At home, radio stations played his music nonstop. People who had grown up with his voice simply couldn't believe he was gone. That voice, so full of warmth and comfort, had been claimed by the very sky he adored. Friends in the music world were shaken. Many had no idea John was still flying. Some weren't surprised. "He was a thrill seeker," one friend admitted, "but we never thought it would end like this." Some blamed the FAA for being too strict. Others blamed John for ignoring the rules. Either way, the outcome was the same. The NTSB's final report was cold, clinical, and unflinching. The crash was caused by the pilot's attention being diverted while attempting to switch fuel tanks, the poorly located valve, the lack of autopilot, the low fuel. All of it added up. There was no mechanical failure, and no sabotage, no substance use, just a chain of preventable choices. John Denver's family stayed mostly silent. His children, Jesse Bell and Zachary, issued brief statements thanking fans, requesting privacy, and reminding everyone that their father lived with love and purpose. The crash didn't erase his legacy, but it did add a tragic chapter to it. Now, when people think of John Denver, they remember not just the music, but the man who loved the sky so much that it ultimately took him. He sang of sunshine and peace. But behind the scenes, there were personal struggles, quiet ones that followed him to the very end. And in the final moments of his life, John Denver wasn't just a singer or a celebrity. He was a man, alone in the sky, trying to do something simple and paying the ultimate price. Shadows behind the spotlight. People loved John Denver for the image he projected. The mountain-loving dreamer, guitar in hand, singing about nature and simple joys. But offstage, the story was more complicated. Denver wrestled with the pressures of fame, a shifting music industry, and the painful feeling of being misunderstood. As investigators and the media unraveled the mystery of his death, deeper personal truths began to surface, truths that cast new light on his final days. By the mid-1980s, Denver's music started losing favor with record companies. His clean-cut image didn't fit the louder, rebellious trends dominating the charts. While other stars pushed boundaries to sell records, Denver still sang about country roads and soaring eagles. Industry executives saw him as outdated, and that rejection hit him hard. Determined to adapt, John reached out to newer producers and infused his songs with heavier themes: environmental protection, world peace, social responsibility. But the mainstream audience didn't return. His songs stopped topping charts. Invitations to big shows slowed to a trickle. For a man whose voice once filled stadiums, the silence felt deafening. This shift left its mark. John turned inward, writing more songs but releasing fewer. He poured himself into activism, saving forests, protecting oceans, raising alarms about the planet's decline. While this gave him purpose, it couldn't fill the void left by a fading career. Behind closed doors, personal struggles deepened. His marriage to Annie Martell, the inspiration behind Annie's song, ended after more than a decade. Though they adopted 2 children, Zachary and Anna Kate, the couple drifted apart. The divorce wasn't just painful, it shook him profoundly. To symbolize the split, John cut their marital bed in half with a chainsaw. He had once called Annie his greatest love. Losing her took away the solid foundation he'd built. Years later, John admitted that fame had changed him. He became controlling, overly focused, sometimes difficult to be around. His perfectionism strained relationships and increased his stress. In 1988, Denver married Australian actress Cassandra Delaney. They lived in Aspen and had a daughter, Jessie Bell. But the marriage was short-lived. They separated in 1991 and divorced 2 years later. John once joked, "Before our short-lived marriage ended in divorce, she managed to make a fool of me from one end of the valley to the other." The 1990s brought more troubles. His 2 arrests for driving under the influence damaged his reputation and complicated his ability to fly. As covered earlier, Those incidents contributed to the FAA revoking his medical certificate. But what's often overlooked is how deeply these events affected John emotionally. After his second arrest in 1994, he sought counseling voluntarily. He spoke openly about his mistakes. He wasn't proud of them, but felt trapped. He couldn't undo the past, yet moving forward was blocked at every turn. Every effort to rebuild was met with reminders of what he had lost, both career-wise and in public trust. Yet John kept flying. Not to break rules, but because flying was one of the last places he truly felt himself. He once said that the view from the sky made him feel small in the best way, as if the world was bigger than his problems. Being airborne connected him to the universe in a way nothing else could. But the burdens he carried didn't vanish with takeoff. Some believe his final flight wasn't just about testing a plane. It was about escaping. The noise, the loneliness, the feeling that his best days were behind him. He longed to feel joy again, and the sky had always given him that. The public rarely saw this side of John. They saw the smile, the guitar, the man singing in front of majestic mountains. But the truth was, he was just as human as anyone, filled with regrets, hopes, flaws, and pain. That's what made his story so heartbreaking. His death wasn't caused by recklessness alone. It was shaped by years of quiet sadness, fading fame, and decisions made under emotional weight, something no safety report could measure. As more details emerged, fans asked new questions, ones beyond fuel tanks and cockpit controls. Did anyone see the signs? Did John feel heard? Was he lonely? Was flying his escape or a cry for help? These questions aren't easy to answer, especially from afar. But those closest to him said that even in his brightest moments, an intensity never faded. He felt everything deeply: joy, sorrow, hope, disappointment. He was always thinking, feeling, dreaming. The plane crash was the final chapter, but the story leading up to it was long and layered. The last-hour decisions, not refueling, ignoring the valve problem, skipping a flight plan, were shaped by more than overconfidence. They were shaped by years of emotional wear and tear. Perhaps the true mystery solved isn't just how the plane crashed, but why John Denver, a man with so much to live for, took that risky flight. He wasn't reckless for fun. He was searching for peace, for joy, for something beyond the clouds. For fans worldwide, the mystery behind his final flight may be answered, but it's not easier to understand or accept. What hurts most isn't just that he died. It's how and why. Back in Colorado, a place John loved deeply, something special was created. At Red Rocks Amphitheater, a bronze statue stands, a towering 15 feet tall, showing John with a guitar strapped on, arms outstretched, and a large eagle perched beside him. It symbolizes not just the singer, but the man who cared deeply for the earth and its creatures. People travel from far and wide to see it. Years later, in October 2014, John was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. His children, Jesse, Belle, and Zachary, stood proudly beside it. But beyond statues and honors, the true legacy remains the music. His songs still play on radios. His voice still fills homes. His lyrics still move hearts. Maybe that's the real legacy, not the crash, the plane, or the sorrow, but the joy he left behind. Even today, when Take Me Home, Country Roads, or Annie's song comes on, people pause, listen, and remember. In those moments, John Denver lives on. Still, many can't stop wondering about that last flight. Why did he take off that day? Why didn't he wait to fix the fuel valve? Why didn't he refuel? Some say he was just excited. A new plane, weeks old, and he couldn't wait to fly it. Others believe he sought the peace flying gave him, something music no longer could. And some think he was trying to feel alive again after years out of the spotlight. For some fans, John's final flight felt like an unplanned goodbye, a moment meant to be. The sky had always been his sanctuary. Maybe in that moment, he just wanted to be close to it one last time. But it didn't have to end this way. If he had waited, finished the repairs, filled the tank, he might have flown safely again. That's the painful mystery. The facts are known, but the pain remains. In the end, what people remember isn't the crash, it's the man, the singer, the dreamer, the one who looked to the stars and reached for them, who saw beauty in every tree, every mountain, every breeze, and who reminded us that home isn't just a place. John Denver's final song was never written. It lives in the wind, the sky, and the quiet space between hope and memory. Maybe it didn't need words. Maybe the way he lived and left said it all. And though the mystery is solved, the echo of his voice will never fade. Somewhere high above the clouds, his song still sings. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.